pesticides. Today we will be discussing about the analytical part. That means after extraction we will go for analysis. Mainly chromatography is the tool by which we will be analyzing the samples. I hope you have gone through the links I have provided so that you have a basic understanding. Uh, so I'll be sharing the link. Hope it's visible now, the slides.
Yes, sir.
Just a minute. Okay. So first we will discuss what is chromatography. Yesterday I just told you what is chromatography, and I told you chromatography is nothing but separation of a mixture of compounds into individual compounds. Yesterday we have seen an example of chromatography wherein we had a mix of colors. The various colors were mixed to have a black color, and we separated out using a solid phase extraction cartridge, and we separated out it into the constituent colors such as red, blue, and yellow, I think. Okay, so that is nothing but chromatography. Actually it was used for separation of colors. That's why the term chromatography came into existence. So our intention in chromatography is to separate out the components in a mixture. Say, a farmer has used an insecticide mixture. Say we have several insecticide mixture molecules now, chlorpyrifos, cypermethrin, one usual combination. So if you want to analyze the residue in that sample, say he sprayed it on bitter gourd. If you want to analyze the residues in bitter gourd, your technique should be able to separately analyze from chlorpyrifos as well as cypermethrin. Then only we can say that whether residues of chlorpyrifos and cypermethrin is present. And other than that, usually what happens is that uh, in the case of bitter gourd, not only the chemical but also the co-extractives. That means the inherent constituent chemicals from bitter gourd also will interfere with the analysis. So everything should be able to separate out, we should be able to separate it out, and we should be able to identify the target pesticide. So that is chromatography. So that's why yesterday I told there are labs which has the capacity to analyze 400 pesticides at a time. That means their chromatographic technique is so perfect that they can separate out 400 pesticides from a mixture. That means if you have a mixture of 400 pesticides, inject it into a chromatographic equipment, their technique will individually tell, yes, this is pesticide 1, 2, 3, 4 till 400. Individually separate it out. So that's the advantage of a chromatography tool. Any chromatography will have two phases, one mobile phase and another one is a stationary phase. I will take the yesterday's example. We had solid phase extraction cartridges, and in that we have filled adsorbents such as alumina and fluorescein, and we have added sample to it, and then we added solvent into it. Then what will be the mobile phase and what will be the stationary phase? Let's check whether you understood anything about chromatography.
Solvent is the mobile phase, and the
Yes,
cartridge solid is the stationary
stationary
phase.
phase. Yes, anything which remains, which is not moving, that is the adsorbent that is remaining in that cartridge, which is not moving, that is the stationary phase. The solvent which we are adding into that stationary phase and which moves according to the force of gravity, that is called as the stationary mobile phase. And what will happen is that if you are adding a mixture of compounds into the top of that stationary phase, the compounds will get separated out based on the affinity of the compound to the stationary phase as well as the solvent. So we have a mixture of two compounds, A and B. And A is having very high solubility in, or very high affinity to the solvent, and B is having very high affinity to the stationary phase, adsorbent. Which one will be coming first if you're adding solvent into it? If you're adding mobile phase into that cartridge, which one will move first and come out of the cartridge first?
One with the solvent. A.
Yes, A. So the compound which has very high affinity to the solvent will come out of the cartridge first, and that compound which is having the affinity towards the stationary phase will get adsorbed onto the stationary phase and will move very slowly and will come out last. This is the basic principle. So this is how we separate out compounds in a chromatography. This chromatography can be classified into two: normal phase chromatography and reverse phase chromatography. That normal phase chromatography means that the stationary phase is a polar phase, while the mobile phase is non-polar. Whereas in reverse phase, it's exactly opposite. The mobile phase is polar, while the stationary phase is non-polar. So if you are taking a normal phase chromatography, and if your compound is polar, that polar compound will get adsorbed onto the stationary phase. While the mobile phase which we are using is a non-polar one, and the first thing to come out, we call it as eluting out. Eluting out, I'll type it. Eluting out. The first thing to elute out of the stationary, first thing to elute out of that chromatography will be the non-polar one, because we are using a non-polar solid. Reverse will happen in the case of reverse phase chromatography. Are you clear? Normal phase and reverse phase chromatography?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So this is the thing. This is this is the stationary phase. We are introducing the mixture of compounds over here, and we will be allowing the mobile phase to move over from here to here. So depending upon the affinity of the compound to the stationary phase and the mobile phase, it gets separated. Here, the yellow colored compound is having very high affinity towards the mobile phase, so it comes out of the stationary phase first, and the blue colored compound has very less affinity to the mobile phase, so it comes out last. This is chromatography. Mainly two kinds of chromatography is used in pesticide residue analysis. First one is gas. We usually call it as gas chromatography, GC, but actually the term is gas liquid chromatography. Another chromatographic tool which we use is HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography. HPLC, HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography. Okay. So these two are the liquid chromatography, that is high performance liquid chromatography, and gas liquid chromatography is the one which we normally use for pesticide residue analysis. We will first discuss about gas liquid chromatography. And in gas liquid chromatography, as the name indicates, the mobile phase is a gas, while the stationary phase is a liquid. Mobile phase is a gas, and the stationary phase is a liquid. And another characteristic of a gas liquid chromatography is that this equipment, this gas liquid chromatography, we here the what we do is we will heat up the compound. The sample which we are introduced, that sample will be volatilized at high temperature. That means the sample should be volatile. That means we should be able to convert the compound into gaseous state at a higher temperature. But even if it gets converted into gaseous state, should not get degraded at higher temperature. That means the sample should be thermally stable. And another thing is volatile. That only when the compound gets converted into the gaseous phase, then only the mobile phase gas can carry the compound through the stationary phase. Our mobile phase is gas, not liquid. So only the gaseous sample, if we could convert the gaseous sample into the gaseous form, then only the mobile phase can carry the compound, that can carry the volatilized sample through the stationary phase. So whatever sample which we are introducing in gas liquid chromatography for analysis should be thermally stable, because we are operating it at a high temperature, usually 300 up, we may go up to 300 degrees Celsius. We can start it from room temperature and we can go up to 300 degrees Celsius. And another most important thing is should be volatile. That means at high temperature, it should get converted into gaseous phase so that the carrier gas can uh, uh, carry forward the volatilized samples through the stationary phase. Are you clear?
Yes.
Yes. And this is what I told. The sample will be vaporized first at high temperature, and this vaporized, that volatilized sample in the gaseous phase will be carried over by the mobile phase, that is a gas, through the stationary phase. And once the compound, the sample is allowed to pass through the stationary phase with the help of the flow of the mobile phase, which is a gas, again a gas, the compounds will get separated out based on its affinity towards stationary phase. Those compounds which have affinity towards stationary phase will move very slowly. Those compounds which does not have any affinity towards stationary phase travels quickly along with the gaseous mobile phase. Okay, fine. Shall I move?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So let's see what are the parts, components of a gas liquid chromatograph. The first one is the source of carrier gas. That means we need mobile phase as a gaseous mobile phase. So we need to have a source of the mobile phase, that is source of carrier gas. Then we should have an injector wherein we introduce the sample. Then we have the column wherein we have the stationary phase where the separation occurs. And at the end of the column, we have a detector so that we detect the separated out compounds individually with the help of a detector. And after detected, we have a data system. Data system is nothing but a PC. So we have softwares to analyze it. So it will have a source of carrier gas, injector, column, detector, and a recording system. So the carrier gas will carry over the volatilized sample from the injector through the column, and inside the column, the compounds will get separated out, and the separated out compounds will be detected by the detector, and the data will be recorded. Let's see a diagrammatic representation. This is the source of the carrier, usually cylinders. We have cylinders, usually we have 45-liter cylinders, very big, just like the oxygen cylinder which you see in hospitals. Similar to that kind of cylinders, we have gas, we have control, pressure gauge, valves, etc., fitted over the cylinders and through the channel to control the flow and pressure of the carrier gas, and the carrier gas is taken into the injector, and in the injector the sample will be injected, and this injector will be kept at a high temperature so that immediately after injection the introduced sample will be vaporized, and as the sample gets vaporized the carrier gas will carry the vaporized sample through the column. This what you see is the column. Through the carrier gas will carry the samples through the column, which contains the stationary phase. So the sample will get separated out into individual components in the column, and it will reach the detector. Here it is the detector, and detector detects each and every compound, and it will give out the data into the data system. Then we will see one by one each and every part. The first thing is the source of the carrier gas. The purpose of carrier gas is to carry the vaporized compound through the stationary phase in the column. That is the purpose of the carrier gas. But the carrier gas should be an inert one. That means it should not react with the compound. If it reacts with the compound, we won't be able to analyze the target compound. So it should be an inert gas that should not react with the compound. The normal carrier gas which we use are helium, argon, and nitrogen. Though hydrogen is also listed as a carrier gas, we don't normally much use hydrogen. We usually use here in gas chromatograph in our lab we use nitrogen, and in GCMSMS we use helium as the carrier gas. So helium, argon, nitrogen are the three gas which we commonly use as a carrier gas. But in certain gas chromatograph, there are certain kinds of detector called as FID and MPD. I will discuss about this detectors in 5 to 10 minutes. FID is nothing but flame ionization detector. Flame ionization detector. Have you ever seen flame photometer?
Yes, sir.
Yes. How does it work? Have you seen an LPG cylinder at the bottom of that flame photometer? Yes or no?
No, sir.
No. Then how that? Did you see that flame in that? We should observe all those things. In flame photometer, we connect it. Actually, it should burn. So we should have a source of gas, LPG. The domestic LPG is the one which we use in that. So the gas it burns, and once we introduce the sample, the potassium inside it will burn, and potassium gets excited, and once it returns to the normal state, it releases color, and that color is detected. That is flame photometer. That's the color is detected. That's why it is called as flame photometer. Here it's similar. It's flame ionization detector. Anyway, here also it requires a flame. That means the compound is burnt here. In nitrogen phosphorus detector, NPD, NPD is called as nitrogen phosphorus detector. Here also we need a flame to burn the compounds. We'll see how the detection happens. So in order to burn it, invariably we need oxygen. Without oxygen, anything can't burn on its own. And we provide hydrogen also to increase the combustion, because hydrogen will is a combustible gas, and if we add hydrogen to oxygen, it will improve the combustion of the compound. So in those gas chromatographs where we use flame ionization detector and uh, uh, nitrogen phosphorus detector, we have two more gas. It's not the mobile phase, it is used in the detector part. They are hydrogen and zero air. Zero is nothing but the source of oxygen, that is air. And whatever gas which we normally use is should be of very high purity, 99.999% purity. And for GCMS and all, we usually say we need 99.99995% purity. Extremely pure gas should be used because we are going for very trace analysis. And as I told you, pressure regulator, pressure gauges, flow meters are etc. there to control the flow of the gas. So this is carrier gas. Then comes the injector. I will explain it with a diagram. Okay. Here, this is the injector. Actually, this injector will be having a hypodermic syringe, just like a glass syringe, the normal way, but the capacity of the syringe is very low. It is varies from 1 microliter to 10 microliter because we inject only very fine quantity. It's not like 1 ml to 10 ml syringes which we normally see in hospitals. No, this is 1 microliter to 10 microliter syringe, very fine syringe. And with that syringe, it's similar. We have a metallic needle at the tip, and what you see it over here, see this black solid colored one, this is the syringe. With this syringe we inject the sample into the injector. This is the injector, and it is injected through a septum, silicon septum over here. What you see it over here, this thing, this is a silicon septum. Through the silicon septum, the syringe will insert the sample into this injector. This injector is held at high temperature. I told you that temperature we can adjust depending upon the compound which we want to analyze. There are certain compounds such as essential oils and all. It doesn't need very high temperature to volatilize. So here then we can keep it at a temperature of say 60, 70, 80 or degree or 90 degree. And for certain compounds, we may require a very high temperature for volatilization. In that case, we can raise up to 250, 300 degrees Celsius. So depending upon the compound which we want to analyze, we can change the temperature. So depending upon the temperature set, the temperature will be here, and at that temperature, the compound will get vaporized. So here the carrier gas will be connected to the injector at this point. So carrier gas coming from the cylinders will reach over here. It is held at high pressure so that the carrier gas will carry the vaporized sample through the injector into the column. This injector is directly connected to the column. You can see it. So the carrier gas will carry the vaporized sample from the injector into the column. One thing you have to remember, carrier gas, which is it is held at a high pressure, so that any vaporized sample will not escape from here because we have a flow from the cylinder into the injector. It won't backflow. But we are injecting through this opening, and a part of the sample may get lost through this opening through which we have injected the sample. In order to prevent that, we have kept that silicon septum. I will show that silicon septum. You just see my video. Can you see a small cylindrical disc kind of thing?
Yes, sir.
Yes. This is the septum. Actually, what will happen is that if we inject a syringe through this, and if we take it out, this silicon septum automatically seals itself. It has the ability to close on its own. So what will happen? This is the top of the injector. We have the septum over here. This is the syringe. The syringe will pierce through the septum. inject the sample into the injector. Once it withdraws, this silicon septum automatically seals that hole so that the vaporized sample as well as the mobile phase does not escape from the injector. Understood? And this injector will have a glass lining. We call it as liner. I will show a liner. See, this is the glass liner. I don't know whether you are able to see it over here. We will inject the sample over here. Can you see a whitish color over here? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Answer is not.
No. Look into my video. Can you see a white color? This is the liner which is inside the injector. Can you see some white color over? This is nothing but glass wool. The purpose is if anything is there, anything is that the glass wool will absorb any co-extractors in that so that it won't damage the column, especially in the case of curry leaf and all. If we inject about 100 or 150 samples of curry leaf, after the injection, I told you curry leaf will have a lot of phenols. This glass wool will be completely turned black in color. So this is an added protection to prevent the contamination of column. So
Sir,
this
is there any
no, it's not a liquid, it's
mold?
a solid one.
Okay.
It's a solid one. This is glass wood. And these liners are all very costly. Actually, this liner costs somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000, and we have to replace it after every 300 injections. That means every 2 months we have to replace it. So certain labs, what they will do is we can eat. If we have the patients, you can remove this glass wool from this liner, and we can clean it and again reuse the liner. But it's very cumbersome process. We don't normally advise it. Companies also don't normally advise it. But that can be done. So, are you clear with injector?
Yes, sir.
So, injector is a heated chamber containing a glass liner. Sample is injected into the injector with the help of a microsyringe. It is called as microsyringe because it handles microliter quantity, and it is inserted through a self-sealing silicon rubber second that I told you. It is maintained at a temperature which can vaporize the sample, and the carrier gas carries the vaporized sample into the column. When coming to the column, actually column is present in a oven. Oven, we call it as oven because this is held at a high temperature. That means this column is kept in a, say, a cubicle kind of thing, and this cubicle kind of thing is oven where we can control the temperature, we can adjust the temperature, and in that column which is kept in that oven, the actual separation happens, and because of that, the column is called as the heart of gas chromatograph because this is where the separation happens. Earlier, about 20 25 years back, whatever gas chromatographs which we were using were isothermal. That means if we fix a temperature for the oven will maintain that particular temperature throughout the analysis so that the column will be kept at that temperature. But nowadays, all the gas chromatographs have a programming oven. That means we can change the temperature during the course of analysis. Say you started the analysis at 100 degrees Celsius. After 5 minutes, you can just give a command before starting the analysis. So, say your analysis is having a time of 30 minutes. So you will give a command that after 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, the temperature should be 100. After 5 minutes, raise the temperature to 150 and keep at 150 for again for 5 minutes. So altogether 10 minutes over. Then from after 10 minutes, raise the temperature to 200 degrees Celsius and keep at that 200 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes. So that means again 20 minutes are over. Then raise it to 250 degrees Celsius till 25th minute, and after 25th minute, maintain it at 300 degrees Celsius. Like that, we can program. Why we are maintaining the column in an oven and maintaining it at higher temperature? See, actually, in the first step, in the injector part itself, we have volatilized the sample. Once the volatilized sample reaches the column, in the column also should be maintained at that temperature or a slightly higher temperature. Otherwise, if the column is kept at room temperature, the volatilized sample will condense in the column itself. It won't be in the gaseous phase. It will convert again into the liquid phase, and it won't move along with the gaseous mobile phase. So if you are keeping the injector at 100 degrees Celsius, the column should be at 100 degrees Celsius or higher, so that the sample which is vaporized at 100 degrees Celsius remain in the gaseous phase once it moves through the column. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So here we will do a few things. This is actually during analysis we do. Theory part, there is no need to understand all those things. Say, see if you have a mixture of 10 compounds. This 10 compounds will have 10 different boiling point, temperature at which it volatilizes. There will be one or two compounds which will volatilize at 100 degree, another few will be at 150, another at 200, but a few things will be volatilized at 300 or something. So the injector first we will keep it at 100 degrees Celsius. So those compounds among the 10, only one or two will be vaporizing at 100 degrees Celsius. That vaporizes and that will be carried first. Then injector we will increase the temperature quickly. It won't be in a 30-minute and all. We will raise the temperature pretty quickly in an injector. Within say 0.5 seconds or even milliseconds we can adjust, raise it to 150. Then those compounds which vaporize at 150 degrees vaporize. So like that we can raise it. So your column also you can slowly raise the temperature. Initially the column will be at say 125, then raise it to 175, then raise it to 300, so that based on the boiling point of the compound also we can separate it out. So that's because if you have a mixture of compounds, if you have a mixture of two compounds, one have a boiling point of 100 and another have a boiling point of 300, you have to keep the injector temperature at 300 invariably. So if you are keeping the injector temperature at 300, the column also should be, the oven temperature also should be at 300. Immediately after injection at 300 degrees Celsius, the compound which has low boiling point at boiling point of 100 degrees immediately vaporizes. It quickly passes through the column along with the mobile phase. We won't be able to detect it properly. So these kind of things practically we adjust with the equipment that we learn while we use the instrument. So this is with respect to the oven, and in the oven we have the column. This column. Just a minute, I will just try to show a column also. Actually, this is very thin. Earlier, there are different kinds of columns such as packed column and capillary column. Packed columns are the ones which were used earlier. These packed columns are made out of glass, metal such as copper, aluminum, stainless steel, etc., or Teflon tubes. But these packed columns are not nowadays used. This is slightly bigger columns. That means its diameter is about varies from 2 to 3 millimeter. but its length is small. Length is 0.5 to 2 meter. But nowadays, it's not the packed column which has shorter length and wider diameter. It's not the one which we use. Which we normally use is capillary column. These capillary columns are made out of stainless steel, aluminum, copper, glass, etc. Usually, it is made of copper. Whatever I have seen is made of copper. And see the length, it is 30 meter in diameter. It is very long. And it is extremely fine, very thin. That's why it is called as a capillary column. The diameter is few tenths of it. It's not even a millimeter. Few tenths of a millimeter. And inside that column, whether it is packed column or capillary column, packed column it is a bit wider but shorter in length. Capillary column, very fine column, but a longer, about 30 meter in length. This column will be having a stationary phase, a solid stationary phase, and that solid stationary phase will be coated with a liquid. I will repeat, the column will be filled with a solid material, and that solid material, you can imagine what will be the diameter of that solid material. The diameter of that capillary column is few tenths of a millimeter, and inside that we are filling with a solid particle, and that solid particle will be coated with a liquid, and that liquid is the one which acts as the stationary phase. So a column is made up of glass or metal, and inside that glass or metal we will have a solid fine particle, very fine particle, and that solid fine particle will be coated with a liquid, and that liquid coated on very fine particle acts as the stationary phase. And that liquid, we call that, normally the liquid is made up of siloxanes. And that, here it's there, that stationary material, dialkyl siloxanes. So this siloxanes will have affinity towards, varying affinity towards compounds, and depending upon the affinity, we can separate out the compound. Just I will show a capillary column. You have to handle it carefully, because this is extremely fine one. Can you see my video? Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
See, this is the these are copper tubings. You can see the color, very fine tubing. This is a capillary column with a length of 30 meter. That means 30 meter repeatedly wound over here. So that means the compound will move several times, loop again and again through this column, and during this movement it gets separated out. If you were here, I could have shown how the instrument works and all. So that is with respect to the column. Though we packed columns, that is the traditional one. I don't think any lab now use packed column. Actually, it's an obsolete kind of thing nowadays. Only capillary columns are available. Coming to the next, that is detector. So we have completed carrier gas, injector, column, detector. So what the purpose of detector? So by the time the compound reaches, the sample reaches the tip of the column, end of the column, the compound will get separated out into individual components. Agreed. But the compounds coming out, just like I will give an example. Say you are going into, say, so, say any government meeting or to a mall or anything. So, or imagine you are going to a cinema theater. Maybe 3 years back, you are going to a cinema theater. You are going along with a group of friends. So, all there are 10 or 15 of you. You went in a group. You purchase the ticket. So, once you purchase the ticket, before entering into the theater complex, you will be standing in a queue. One by one, you will be allowed to enter after checking. So similarly, earlier the sample was in a group. After passing through the column, it gets separated out individually. So one by one, it will be coming out of the column. And detector is the one which detects. Yes, this is the yes, the first one. Just like say a metal detector, one by one, it checks. So this the function of the detector is to transform the chemical or physical properties of the analytes into electrical signals, because electrical signals are the easiest one to measure. Even very fine change in an current can be easily detected. So the detector transforms the chemical or physical properties of the analyte into an electrical signal. I will discuss how this chemical and physical properties gets transferred into signal if we, once we did discuss about the individual detectors. So the function of the detector is to sense. Sense means qualitatively whether a compound is present or not, and also to measure the separated components. That means it has to sense, that means it has to check whether the compound is present or not. If the compound is present, then what is the quantity of the compound? Measure the amount of the compound from the separated components. As the carrier gas carries the individual components through the column. And the output of the detector, this whatever the detector detects, it is fed to a computer and it gives a chromatograph. We will see what it will be a chromatograph. Now let's see how this detector actually works. We will see different kinds of detector. Then you can understand how the detector works. So detector, we have different kinds of detector. Actually, there are two different classifications of detector. One is selective detector and non-selective detector. Selective detectors are those detectors which will detect certain kind of compounds. I told you nitrogen phosphorus detector. Nitrogen phosphorus detector is a detector which detects only those compounds which contain nitrogen and phosphorus atom. So that's a selective detector because it selectively detects certain kind of compounds. Then we have non-selective detector. That means it detects all kind of compounds. One typical example is TCD. We will see in the next slide. Thermal conductivity detector. Whatever the atom present in it, it will be able to detect it. But there are selective detectors which selectively detects the compounds. Then there is another classification of detector, that is destructive and non-destructive detector. Destructive detector means during the detection process, the separated compounds will get destroyed. I told you about flame ionization detector. That means the compound will be burned. That means that is destroying the sample. So that is destructive detector. And the next one is non-destructive detector. That means during the detection process, it won't harm the compound. Are you clear with the two classification of detectors?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let's say the type of detector. The first one is flame ionization detector. Then sometimes it is called as flame photometric detector also. Then flame photometric detector is another kind of ionization detector, and for flame photometric detector. Then we have nitrogen phosphorus detector, electron capture detector ECD, TCD is thermal conductivity detector, and the most advanced one is mass spectrometer. So FID, that is flame ionization detector, NPD nitrogen phosphorus detector, FPD it is flame photometric detector, ECD is electron capture detector, TCD is thermal conductivity detector, and MS is mass spectrometer. So we will see it one by one quickly. So flame ionization detector, as I told you, flame ionization detector burns the compounds. So burning any compound requires hydrogen. Oxygen is required. You will add hydrogen also to uh, burn it more effectively. So you can see the diagram over here. From the column, the compound will be coming over here. It gets mixed with air and hydrogen, and it will be burned over here, the flame. So once it is burned, any organic compound, once it is burned, it gets converted into ions. And here we have electrodes. So once it is converted into ions, anion are positively charged or negatively charged ions, depending upon the charge, it gets attracted to the electrode, and the electrode will measure a current. This is how the detector measures it. So if there is a change in the current, then FID will say yes, a compound is present, and depending upon the intensity of the current, if there is a higher current, that means that quantity is high. We can measure that also. So this is how FID works. Clear?
Sir, electric current ഓരോ കോമ്പൗണ്ടിനും ഡിഫറെന്റ് ആയിരിക്കും
No,
ഡിറ്റക്ട്
no. It detects either anion or cation. Depending upon the number of ions, that compound, one thing it will be different, that it will be that the number of ions formed from each compound will be different. The ionization capacity of each compound will, certain compounds will get easily ionized, more number of ions will be there, certain compounds will less number of ions. Those compounds which get ionized easily with more number of ions, that can be detected at very low amount. The limit of detection will be very low. But those compounds which are not ionized easily, their limit of detection will be high. Only at high concentration will be able to detect. That will be the difference. Understood?
yes sir.
The next one is NPD, nitrogen phosphorus detector. Actually, it's nothing but a modified version of flame ionization detector. That means this is done to enhance the sensitivity towards those compounds containing nitrogen and phosphorus. So I will show the picture, then you will be able to understand. So this is nothing but, up to here it is nothing but a flame ionization detector. Column connected to the detector, we have a source of air and hydrogen to burn the compounds. It is burned. At the tip of the flame, we have a rubidium bead. Rubidium. You can see, yes, rubidium bead. This rubidium bead is held at a high temperature of 600 to 800 degree Celsius. And once the compounds are burned, all those compounds which are having nitrogen and phosphorus will get attracted towards that rubidium bead, and it will generate a current, and that current will be measured. So this is a slight nitrogen phosphorus detector. Detector is slight modification of flame ionization detector. So those compounds containing nitrogen and phosphorus will get absorbed onto the rubidium bead. It will generate ions, and that ions will be detected by the electrode. This is nitrogen phosphorus detector, a modification of flame ionization detector. The next one is flame photometric detector. Flame photometric detector, I told you about flame photometer in the case of potassium analysis in soil. So any compound, once it is burned, not all compounds, certain compounds, once it is burned, it moves into an excited state. In chemistry, you might have learned it. Electrons moving into an excited state. Once it returns back to the normal state, it releases energy. Do you remember that in school? You might have studied in chemistry. Yes. So once it returns to the normal state, it releases energy, and that energy may be released in the form of light in certain group of compounds. In potassium, I think that color is lilac or something. Is it so? I forgot what the color of potassium once it is burned. But I studied in soil science. I studied in soil science. And that color is measured. So once it is burned, moves into an excited state. Once it is returned to the normal state, it releases energy in the form of light, and that light is measured. And this flame photometric detector is used for detection of compounds containing phosphorus and sulfur, because phosphorus and sulfur releases light once returns to the normal state. So because of this, flame photometric detector is the detector which we normally use for detection of OP compounds, because every OP will have a phosphorus atom. So we use it for OP compounds. OP compounds also contain sulfur, that you might be remembering the classification of OP: thiophosphate, dithiophosphate, phosphonate, phospholate, etc. So everything has a sulfur atom. Coming to the next one, that is ECD. ECD is one important detector in pesticide residue analysis because it has the ability to detect compounds at very low level, and that means it has very high sensitivity. And electron capture detector, what it will have, it is having a core part of electron capture detector is a radioactive beta emitter source. That means there is a radioactive source. Usually isotopes of hydrogen and nickel are used. That means if there is a radioactive source, it will continuously emit electron. Radioactive compounds, it will decay. You might have studied. According to, depending upon their half-life, it goes on decaying, and during that decay process, it releases electrons. And so that chamber containing that radioactive source, it will have a constant flow of electrons. So once the carrier gas is without any, before introduction of the sample, once we switch on the instrument, we have to, before switching on the instrument, we have to first switch on the carrier gas. So once you switch on the instrument, the carrier gas will be flowing through that chamber containing the radioactive source. So nitrogen, if nitrogen is the carrier gas, nitrogen passes through this chamber containing the radioactive source, where we have a flow of electron. That nitrogen will the electron will just a minute. The nitrogen that will interaction of nitrogen with that ion source will lead to ionization of nitrogen, and it will release electron. And this electron, a electron is current, and this electron will be measured by giving through with the help of an anode. So if there is a constant flow of nitrogen, there will be a constant release of electron, then that means a constant current. And this will give a baseline, that means a constant current, that will be the baseline. Then we will introduce the sample. So once there is a compound carried along with the carrier gas, then there will be a change in the current because some electrons will be absorbed by the compound, especially those compounds containing electronegative atoms such as chlorine, fluorine, bromine, iodine, etc. Because they are extremely electronegative. Once it passes through an electric field, through a flow of electron, it absorbs electron, and there will be a drop in current compared to the flow of nitrogen gas alone. That drop in current will be measured and it will give a result. So if the concentration of the compound is more, the drop in current also will be more. So depending upon that, we can measure the concentration of the compound. Clear? If you are facing any problem in understanding, just ask to clarify it and move. ECD.
Sir, ECD last part on the board. Electrons release carrier gas, then
Electron, it won't be released by the carrier gas. Actually, the electrons will be once it passes through this ion source, radioactive ion source, it will release electrons. Electron means electron can be attracted to an electrode, isn't it? If you apply a positive potential at one side, the negatively charged electrons will be attracted to that electrode. Yes or no?
yes, sir.
Yes. Then we can measure it. How much is it?
Okay.
So if we are allowing only in the beginning, when we are allowing only nitrogen, the carrier gas to flow through, there will be a constant flow of carrier gas. There will be a constant generation of electron. So there will be a constant current at the electrode. But if you are injecting a sample, once there is a compound which absorbs this electron, there will be a drop because it won't be constant. Some electrons will be absorbed by the compound. And that drop, we can measure it, a change in current.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Then next one, that is thermal conductivity detector. This is one of the easiest detector. This is a non-destructive detector. So here what we will do, we have a filament, just like imagine a old filament bulb which we used in our home, and nowadays it is very obsolete. We have a filament over it. It will be heated. There will be heated filament, you can see, and this reddish dots that you see is the flow of the carrier gas over it. So once the carrier gas is flowing over the heated filament, it will cool the filament to an extent. So you might have studied in physics that depending upon the temperature, the conductivity of the metal changes. Yes or no? Certain metals become more conductive at higher temperature, more or less. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So if the carrier gas is flowing over the filament, it cools the filament, and there will be a constant current because the flow will be constant. We can maintain the flow. That is one thing we can do in gas chromatography. We can precisely maintain the flow of the carrier gas. But what will happen if a compound also comes out along with the carrier gas? Once you introduce the sample, inject the sample, it gets separated out, and if there is a compound coming along with the carrier gas, then the cooling effect will be varying. If the cooling effect varies, then the current also varies. If the current varies, it can be easily detected. Understood?
Yes.
So that is thermal conductivity detector. And coming to the last part, that is interpretation. The interpretation of this data is based on peak area and retention time. We have discussed about peak area and retention time in yesterday also. I will show a chromatogram and I will explain. This is the chromatogram of certain pesticides in our lab. So whatever you see it over here, this is dimethoate. It is at 4.99 minutes. At 5.83 minutes, we have methyl parathion. 6.26, it is malathion. 6.48, it is chlorpyrifos. 6.9, it is quinarphos. 7.3, it is profenophos. 7.67, it is ethion. 8, it is fossilol. So you can see this compounds. So if we have the parameters, say this is a chromatogram which we had obtained with certain set parameters of the gas chromatograph. The parameters such as the temperature of the injector, what is the quantity of the sample which we have injected, what is the flow rate, that means the speed at which the mobile phase passes through the column. The column, there are different kinds of columns. We can change the columns depending on the polarity of the compounds can be changed. The column also should be the same. The detector also should be the same. If all the things remains constant, that means we got dimethoate, methyl parathion, malathion, all these things at this particular time interval. Whatever the parameters at which we got this, if we maintain the same parameter, then if we inject a sample, whatever peak which we get at 4.99 minutes, we will say that it is that of dimethoate. So based on the retention time, we will identify the compound. So qualitative analysis is based on the retention time. The detection of the compound is based on the retention time. That happens only when the analytical parameters of the instrument and all the things remains the same, because instrument parameters we can vary with each and every lab. If we vary this, even if slightly varies the analytical parameters, then it will change. One thing I will give an example. So I told you the capillary column is having a length of 30 meter. If you are using a 25-meter column, what will happen to the retention time of the pesticides? Whether the retention time will increase or decrease? I will repeat.
Decrease.
Yes, Safna.
Decrease.
It will decrease because it will come out quickly, come out early. 5 meter we have removed. So that's why if everything remains constant, then we can say that at 4.99 minutes, if we have a peak, it is due to dimethoate. So that is qualitative. Then quantitatively, then we have to measure it. That's why I told you, any detector should give qualitative as well as quantitative. So this area, you can see the area of the peak is a function of concentration. So if we have a very high concentration of the compound, the peak will be like this. If we have very low concentration, it will be like this. Sorry. Just a minute. Okay. If we have a very high concentration, just a minute. Teacher. Ah, ah. അല്ല ജിഞ്ചറിൽ അതെ ഞാനാ ചെയ്തേക്കുന്നത് ആ അയച്ചുതരാം ആ ആ തരാം ആ ഞാൻ വിട്ടോളാം ഞാൻ എല്ലാത്തിലും വിട്ടോളാം So if we have a compound at very high concentration, the peak will look like this. But if the compound is at very low concentration, it will be like this. Very narrow peak with a very, see, it will be like this. So depending upon the peak area, we can measure the concentration of the compound. So the retention time, where the interpretation is based on retention time, we call it as RT, and peak area. Peak area, as I told you, it gives the concentration. Retention time will be constant when all the parameters are remaining the same. So injector temperature, oven temperature, column, flow rate, detector temperature, etc. Based on the RT, we identify the compound. Based on the peak area, we work out this. How we will work out the concentration is, say, if you have if you injected a standard, say 1 ppm standard, then it gave a signal of 1000. Then standard 1 ppm standard, if you injected, it gave a signal of 1000. Then if you injected a sample and it gave a signal of 2000, it means that it is having 2 ppm. Simple extrapolation. Clear the interpretation of data?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And coming to the next part, that is mass spectrometry. I will try to complete mass spectrometry also. Okay. HPLC will complete in the next class. So in mass spectrometry, this is another advanced method of detection in gas chromatograph. In any gas chromatograph, see, I told you, anything coming out at 4.9 minutes with, say, dimethoate. But if any compound is having the same physicochemical properties as that of dimethoate, it will also come out at 4.99 minutes and will give a false report as that of it is due to dimethoate. So that is possible. So in order to avoid that, we use mass spectrometry. It is more precise and it is a confirmatory step. Up to GC, up to here, what we say, it is not that confirmed. But mass spectrometry is a confirmatory step, and spectrophotometry is a technique which used to measure the molecular weight or atomic weight of compounds and atoms. I will repeat. Spectrometry is a technique to measure molecular weight or atomic weight, but it can measure molecular weight and atomic weight only when that atom or molecule is in the ionized state, either in positively ionized or negatively ionized state. So spectrometry is a technique to measure molecular weight or atomic weight in the ionized state. Okay. And that spectrometry measures it, tries to analyze the molecular, detect the molecular weight based on the mass by charge ratio. I will give an example. Just listen to me. Say you have two compounds. Both compounds are having the same molecular weight. Same molecular weight compound, but same physicochemical properties, but they are having different molecular weight. Same physicochemical property but different molecular weight. So if the molecular weight, if you are applying an electric field, say positively charged or negatively charged electric field, then which compound will be moving, which compound, say both the compounds, I will give the example again. We have two compounds having the same physicochemical properties. Both are in the ionized state, both are having positive charge. One compound is having a higher molecular weight and another compound is having a lower molecular weight. We are applying a constant voltage. Say the compounds are given a charge of negatively charged. Compounds are negatively charged. and we are passing the compounds through a positively charged environment. One is having high molecular weight, another one is having molecular weight, low molecular weight. So what will happen? The compounds are negatively charged, it is moving through the positively charged environment. What will happen?
Lower molecular weight will move faster.
See, I told you the compound is negatively charged and it is passing through an environment of positive charge. See,
It will be slower, no? Means both
this
the
is a tube. Just a minute. This is a tube, and this tube I am giving it a positive charge. So the entire tube is having a positive charge. And I am trying to pass two compounds which are in negatively charged state through this tube which is positively charged. And one compound is having high molecular weight and another compound is having low molecular weight. What will happen if a negatively charged molecule or atom passes through a positively charged tube? Hmm?
it gets deflected.
Gets deflected. It won't reach out. It will get deflected because positive charge attracts negative ion. It gets deflected. It gets attracted onto the positively charged tube. But then we are having two molecules. One is having very high molecular weight. Another one is having low molecular weight. Then what happens to that deflection? Which one will be deflected quickly and which one deflected slowly?
Lower molecular
Molecular weight.
Yes,
quickly deflect.
quickly deflected. Just imagine a human and an elephant. Which one can turn quickly?
Human.
Human. So, even if the two compounds are having the same physicochemical property and the same charge, it can be deflected based on the mass by charge ratio. If it is low molecular weight one, it can be easily deflected. High molecular weight ones are can be will be deflected at a slower rate. So based on this mass by charge ratio, it mass spectrometer separates out the compound. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So the column, just like other detectors, the column will be connected to mass spectrometer, and this mass spectrometer will be maintained at very high vacuum because this electrons, if it is not vacuum, it will interact with molecules in the environment itself, so it will affect the analysis. So this is the parts, a simple diagrammatic representation of a mass spectrometer. Here the sample will be introduced just sample will be introduced and we have an ion source. That means the sample should be ionized. I told you spectrometer analyzes the molecular weight only in the ionic state. So it has to be converted into ion with the help of an ion source. We analyze the mass and we have a detector and a data system. So how we carry out ionization? Well, there are several ionization methods. I have given only a few. This is mainly I have given for gas chromatograph, liquid chromatograph. There are several other ionization methods. I have given here only electron impact ionization, EI, chemical ionization. CI, electron spray ionization, ESI, electron spray ionization. Then we have several other ionizations such as APCA, atmospheric pressure chemical ionization. Then MALDI means matrix assisted laser desorption ionization. MALDI, MALDI. Just remember that there are several kinds of ionization techniques. So these are the common electron impact ionization, chemical ionization, and electron spray ionization. This electron impact ionization, here the compounds coming through the column will be bombarded with electrons of 70 electron volt. Yesterday I have shared a video in Moodle. If you have seen it, you can understand why 70 electron volt is chosen, because 70 electron volt is the power at which all the compounds can be easily broken down. So the compound will be bombarded with 70 electron volt. Once the compound is bombarded with 70 electron volt, it removes the electron from the outer orbitals and the compound will be charged. Understood? Once it is bombarded with electrons in the outer orbitals will be removed and the compound will be positively charged. Once the compound is positively charged, we can measure the mass. In chemical ionization, instead of directly bombarding the compound, we will have a reagent gas, and that reagent gas will be charged. It will be given a positive charge. This reagent gas will interact with the compound, and this reagent gas will transfer the positive charge to the compound, and the compound will get ionized. And in electron spray ionization, the column F will be connected to a nozzle, and this tip of the nozzle will have very high electric field. So once the compound passes through the tip of the nozzle with very high electric field, it will ionize the compound. So electron impact ionization, bombarding the compound, making positive charge. In chemical ionization, a reagent gas will be ionized first, and further the reagent gas will transfer the charge to the compound. And electron spray ionization, the compound will be passed through a nozzle which is held at a very high electric field, so that the compound will get ionized. Clear the three methods of ionization?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Then coming to the next quadruple analyzer, I will show this is a diagrammatic representation of a quadruple. See, earlier we used to have GCMS, gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer. Nowadays we use GCMS or gas chromatograph, tandem mass spectrometer, or GC mass spectrometer, mass spectrometer. The difference is that in earlier instruments we used to analyze only up to this level. That means we have the ion source wherein we ionize the compound, and we have a quadruple. This is called as a quadruple. We can see 4 rods. This is the 4 rods, and here we analyze the mass based on their mass by charge ratio. That was the only one. But now GCMS instruments, once the mass is analyzed, that compound will get dissociated in this. It is called as the second quadruple, Q2. Sometimes it is also called as collision cell. I will show it later. It is also called as collision cell. That means a compound which is coming over to this second quadruple. This is the first quadruple. This is the second quadruple. This is the third quadruple. Here, the mass is analyzed. It is passed on to collision cell, and in the collision cell, it is broken down into daughter ions. I will give a simple example. Say water, H2O. How it gets broken down? What is the molecular weight of water?
136.
18.
18. Okay. So it gets dissociated into
Hydrogen and oxygen.
So then what will be the atomic weight and molecular weight, H plus and OH minus. Easy. Mm. 1 and 16. Hydrogen is 1, oxygen is 16. Yeah?
17.
Ah, 1 and 17. Sorry,
Yes, sir.
1 and 17. So what will happen? Say, remember water is passing through is, it measures the molecular weight. So it measured it as 18. In the second quadruple, it is a collision cell. It breaks down, and it breaks down into water will be invariably breaking down into H plus and OH minus. And in the third quadruple, again we will measure the mass, and then we will have masses such as 1 and 17. Here we got 16 because it is the entire molecular weight of the water molecule. Here it gets broken down into H plus and OH minus, and that H plus and OH minus will be again mass will be measured over here. So it will give a mass of 1 and 17. I will explain with another example. So this is the diagram. This is the first quadruple. This is the this is the collision cell. This is the collision cell, and this is the third quadruple. So Q2 is the collision cell. This is the example, reserpine. See, reserpine, it is having a molecular weight of 608. So this is the structure of reserpine. The 608 molecule, actually this is a positively charged one. Positively charged means a addition of a means say one electron will be added into it, so that because of that the molecular weight here it detects 609. In the first quadruple, this is the first quadruple, this is the collision cell, and this is the third quadruple. So what will happen is that depending on, I forgot how it happens, in between the positive and negative ionization. If it is positively ionized, molecular weight will be increased by 1, or and if negatively charged, molecular weight will be decreased by 1. So that's what happens depending upon the ionization. Positively charged or negatively charged, the molecular weight gets changed by +1 or -1. So that's why we measured the masses 609. Remember, I forgot what is how the molecular weight changes. I will enquire it and tell. That means if the original molecular weight is 608, because of the ionization, we detect only mass of only the ionized compound. So the ionized compound mass we detected as 609. Okay. So this is the structure. In the collision cell, what happens is that, see the structure, we have a ester compound. We bombard in the collision cell, we bombard the compound with electrons. So the compound gets broken down into different parts. So at the ester bond, the compound will get breaks, and here this structure will get removed, and it has a molecular weight of 195, and the remaining part, all this part will have a molecular weight of 397, M/Z ratio of 397. And the compound can also break at this point here. At this point, if it breaks, the remaining all those will have a molecular weight of 448, and this part will be having a molecular weight of 174. So this happens in this breakage happens in the collision cell, second quadruple. Once it reaches the third quadruple, here it measures the molecular weight, and there will be some part of the reserpine which is not completely broken down in the collision cell. So we will measure a molecular weight of 609, that is of the parent compound, that is 609, the reserpine parent compound. And whatever we get, you can see a peak of 397 here, say this compound. Then we will have a peak of 195, see this part. Then we will have a peak of 174C here, this part. Then we will have a peak of 448. This dissociation pattern is constant for each and every compound. Just like I told you, water, H2O, is having a molecular weight of 18. There is another molecule which is having the same molecular weight as 18. But once it reaches the collision cell, so here also there can be a confusion because two compounds are having the same molecular weight. Both compounds, the first quadruplet gives the molecular weight as 18. Then we might be confused. But in the collision cell, it breaks down that water molecule. Water molecule invariably breaks down into H plus and OH minus. So here we will have three peaks. One will be of 18 from the H2O original parent compound, another will be 1, and another will be 70. That is characteristic of water. If another compound is having 18, then it will be different. It may be 14, 3, and 1. It can be anything else. So this fragment, we call it as fragmentation pattern because we break down the compound into fragments. This fragmentation pattern is unique for each and every compound. So based on the molecular weight and its fragmentation, which is measured in the third quadruple, we identify the compound. That means double confirmation. First we confirm the molecular weight, then after the fragmentation, we doubly confirm that it is of the we are analyzing this. The compound is that itself. Are you clear how using a triple quadruple we confirm the presence of a compound?
Yes, sir.
Yes. You see those videos again and again, then you will be able to understand it better because I am not uh, that much an expert in this quadruple and all. Then how does this quadruple measures the mass? That I will explain. Don't look into the video. Look into my video. I will show you how it works. So this see, can you see four? I had kept 1, 2, 3, and 4. Can you see this 4?
Yes, sir.
Yes, these are 4 roads. We call it as quadruple. Okay. So in this quadruple, the opposite roads will be given AC charge, while the two opposite, that means the two roads which are at 180 degree opposite to each other will be given at a time. It will be given AC charge. If it is given AC charge, this will be given DC. In certain books, we might have said DC as well as radio frequency, one and the same. So if it is given AC, these two roads, opposite roads, the other two roads will be given DC. But don't think that this charge is this positive charge or AC current or DC current is constant. It will vary. That means two roads will be given a positive charge, two roads will be negatively charged. Within a few milliseconds, say certain instruments within 5 milliseconds, the charge varies between these two quadruples. That means at a moment, if these two are having positive charge, after 5 milliseconds, this will be having negative charge and this will be having positive. That means the charges switches between the quadruples in a short, extremely short span of time. Are you clear up to this? So we have 4 rods called as quadruples. The quadruples are provided with AC as well as DC charge. At a given moment of time, 2 opposite rods will be having positive charge and the other 2 will be having negatively charged. But it's not constant throughout. It switches this positively charged rod within a few milliseconds. It converts into negative. At that time, the other 2 will be positive. Are you clear?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes. Okay. So now this is the quadruple. Now a molecule, a positively charged molecule, is passing through the quadruple. Okay. So once it enters the quadruple, see this red pen. Once it, I will just change. So consider these 2 reddish ones are having the same charge at a time. So these 2 reddish ones are having positively charged at that moment. So that these 2 silver ones are having negative charge. So if a positively charged compound enters it, because of the positive charge in these 2 electrodes at that moment, it gets deflected and attracted towards the negative charge. But within the next millisecond, this negatively charged quadruple will be positively charged. So before reaching this this negatively charged electrode, the electrode, this quadruple changes its charge to positive, and the positively charged compound gets deflected. This deflected towards the at that time negatively charged electrode over here. But by that time, this negatively charged electrode will get switched over to positively charged and it gets deflected. So likewise, the compound will get remained over here and it gets passed over through this one. But what happens if we change the voltage also? Imagine the quadruple voltage can also be changed. Say I have increased the voltage from what I earlier said. The compound is coming, the positively charged compound is coming. Uh, these 2 are positively charged, these 2 are negatively charged. So we are providing a very high voltage. So once if you are providing very high voltage because of the very high positive charge in these 2 quadruples, the positively charged compound will be deflected very sharply, and this negatively charged quadruple will be attracting that compound very sharply. So before the switching of the voltage, before this quadruple changes its charge, the compound will get deflected and gets and strikes this negatively charged quadruple and it will lose its charge. So depending upon by varying the charge and depending upon the mass of the compound, we can select only those compounds with a specific mass by charge ratio to pass through the quadruple. That means if a compound is having very low molecular weight, then only very little charge will be enough to pass through, allow it to pass through it. Even if you slightly increase the charge, then it will get deflected and get lost in the quadruple. But if you are having a high molecular weight compound, then its deflection will be very low. Then we have to give a very high voltage for it to get deflected onto the quadruple and get lost. So we can adjust the voltage depending upon the mass of the compound. That is why I call mass by charge ratio. And then at a particular mass by charge ratio, only that compound with that particular mass by charge ratio will be passing through the quadruple. Is it clear? I don't know how much I have explained it.
Yes, sir. ഒരു doubt ഉണ്ട്.
Ah,
അത് ക്വാഡ്രപ്പിളിലൂടെ പാസ് ചെയ്യണം എന്നല്ലേ നമ്മുടെ ആവശ്യം.
Yes,
കൊളൈഡ് ആവരുത്. അതിനനുസരിച്ച് വോൾട്ടേജും മോളിക്കുലർ വെയിറ്റും അഡ്ജസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യണം.
yes. So what we will do is, say we have a mixture of 10 pesticides. We will take the standard 10 pesticides. We will inject it. Each 10 pesticide will be having different mass. Once it reaches the quadruple quadruple in this GCMS, we have a mode called as full scan mode. Full scan mode. Full scan mode. So what does it means that it every few milliseconds it changes the current, it changes the voltage and current, and it changes the voltage into switches from plus to minus, minus to plus, plus to minus, minus to plus, and also it varies its voltage from, I think it can vary it from 1000 to 10,000 or something. I forgot the exact range. Different instruments have different range. Our instrument, I forgot the range. So within a short period of time, it switches the voltage plus or minus, it charge the quadruple. Also, it changes the current it is applying to the quadruples. That means it starts from a low current and reaches it to a very high current at a short time. And it analyzes the mass. So only at a particular mass by charge ratio, only a particular molecule will come out. So after we complete the full scan mode, the computer will give us a report. We have at this particular mass by charge ratio, we have a molecule of this molecular weight. So the after full scan, we have that it will tell that we have the M by Z ratio of this particular atom is this much. Anyway, we'll see. It will give the molecular. One more thing, it will also say this. It will give the say the energy at which that compound will be allowed to pass. All those things will be given in that thing. M by Z ratio we will get because we will get the molecular weight. So for that particular molecular weight, say we are injecting 10 compounds and one compound, we know the molecular, say it is 200. Then either at 199 or 201 we'll have it will give the mass, and it will give at that molecular weight. For that molecular weight compound, you have to apply this particular voltage. Then what we will do, all these 10 compounds does not come at a time. Chromatography means it is separation. Once it reaches the column, all the 10 compounds will be separated. One by one it comes out. Say in the chromatogram, just I have shown you, dimethoate is the one which is coming out at 4.99 minute. Then once you complete the scanning for all the full scan for all the compounds, then we will tell the instrument that you provide the voltage for the quadruple, that a particular voltage which we have measured from the full scan mode. Full scan mode will give a particular voltage for dimethoate. You at 4.99 minute provide that particular voltage to quadruple. Then what will happen? Only dimethoate will pass. All other compounds will not pass. Then at 5.3 minute, we know the voltage for parathion, methyl parathion. Switch the voltage that suits methyl parathion. Then only methyl parathion will pass. Understood?
സർ, അപ്പോൾ ഓരോ കോമ്പൗണ്ടിനും ഫുൾ റൺ ചെയ്യും, സ്കാൻ
Yes.
ചെയ്യും,
First we will run for full scan for all.
എല്ലാ വോൾട്ടേജും
Yellow voltage. Yellow voltage. That is full scan mode. This is a full scan mode is an automatic mode. We don't change it manually. Just we will give a command that run a full scan. So if a compound is coming out at say 4.9, within a few milliseconds, fractions of a second, the charge shift from very low value to very high value, and it returns. So it completes the scanning in very few time. So the complete scan. So every few milliseconds, it scans from the lowest voltage to the highest voltage and come back. So we have a complete profile. Yes, Bindu and Swadhi.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this is what is described in the slide. The four cylindrical rods. The opposite rods are connected to DC and radio frequency or AC potential. So it will resonate. I'm mainly discussing about GCMSMS. So here the GCMSMS mainly we convert the compound into positive ions, and only those compounds, only those ions with certain mass by charge ratio will reach the detector. Others will collide with the rods. And by varying the applied voltage, we can select the ions. That's what we discussed. In triple quadruple, we have three quadruples. Actually, the second part is not a quadruple. That's why it is not. It is given in small q, q1, q, and q3. So q1 and q3 are four parallel roads, DC and the same thing which I have discussed. So q1 is the primary M by Z selector after the sample leaves the ionization. So any compound with that particular M by Z ratio will be passing the first quadruple. It reaches the pollution cell, that is the second quadruple, where in the presence of inert gases like argon, helium, or nitrogen, here in our machine we use argon, it is fragmented or broken down into characteristic daughter ions. And this daughter ions will be, molecular weight of this daughter ions will be again measured in the third quadruple. So I'll finish within 2 minutes. So we have at the end of the third quadruple, we have ions, and these ions have to be detected. So at the end of the quadruple, we have a detector. We have different types of detector for mass spectrometer, Faraday cup, scintillation counter, electron multiplier, and photographic plate. Among this, electron multiplier is the one which is commonly used in MSMS. In electron multiplier, it works like that. It is a positively charged electron. As you all know, in mass spectrometer, whatever coming out of the quadruple will be charged, either positively charged or negatively charged. In case of GCMS, it will be mostly positively charged. This positively charged ones will be striking the cathode, and once it strikes the cathode is negatively charged. Once it strikes the cathode, it emits electron, and this emitted electrons will be attracted to a diode. Diode is made up of either 2% beryllium copper or magnesium silver or brass alloy, and this electron which is attracted to diode will strike the diode, and this diode, if one diode strikes one electron that strikes the diode, it will emit 10 electrons. That means it multiplies the electron. Just like if you have seen, I don't know whether you have seen the Ramayana and Mahabharata series. When I was studying in the school, there was Ramayana. Now it was retelecast in Doordarshan. So in that you might, if you have seen that, you might have seen if one person gives out an arrow, it will get multiplied into 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, etc. Similarly, if a single positively charged atom strikes a cathode, it will emit an electron. That electron, if it strikes a diode, it will emit n number of electrons. It multiplies. So it will induce the emission of more electrons, and we can detect, once that is electrons, we can measure the current, and we can quantify the compound, the concentration. Are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So whether those videos were helpful?
Yes, sir.
Bindu and Swati, did you go through those videos?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Uh, this is just a basic thing. If you check for certain videos, because every company has its own patented. This is my MSMS. Actually, this is a patented technology only in the world. We have around 4 or 5 manufacturers for this, not more than that. And every company tries to give. There are these companies advertise their compounds with the fastest switch of voltage. If it switches the voltage fast, that means it will be able to more precisely detect the select the compounds based on M by Z ratio. And certain companies have the ability to very quickly go scan the entire range of voltage. Everything varies. Okay. So I will try to take a few classes on Saturdays and Sunday and Monday. I will just try to look into it, the possibility. Then I will tell you. I'll try to finish off by Sunday and Monday. Only HPLC, it is very. This is just a continuation of this what we have discussed, and then only few classes, nano formulations.
So, so Monday old I'm having midterm and final exam of microbiology.
Okay, then we will have it on Tuesday. Okay, fine.
Okay.
What about Sunday? Whether we'll be able to have a class?
Okay.